Welcome to Sound and Vision, conversations with contemporary artists and musicians about the creative process. Here's the host of Sound and Vision, Brian Alfred.
Episode 200. I just wanted to reflect for a moment before we get into this 200th episode of the podcast. Some thank yous on the occasion. Special thanks to all the artists who've taken time out of their studio schedule and their lives to speak to me. Many thanks to all the listeners. I don't really mention on here all the great response I've gotten to the podcast, all the messages from all over the world from students who appreciate insight on how these artists carved out their niche, from the artist community, who many of which feel a sense of community listening to these artists and their stories. It's been nice to get so much support and kind words for the podcast. Thanks to all the musicians who've lent music to this. If you're an avid listener, you know how important music is to me and what a large role it's played in my life. Michael, Evan, Sean and Yoshimi, David, Will, and all the others, thank you. Thanks to all the sponsors who've supported the podcast, especially to Golden Paints. I've known Mark Golden for over 15 years now, and I couldn't ask for a better sponsor for this podcast. And thanks to Emily Burns. Emily is the talented artist and designer who's lent her skills to making the logo and design for Sound and Vision. She's pretty much the only other person who's had a hand in any aspect of the production of the podcast, and it's greatly appreciated. I spent the last almost 4 years single-handedly booking, recording, editing, and making this thing happen. Having a full-time art practice, a teaching job at Penn State, an amazing family, co-running a non-profit youth soccer club, and whatever else fills my schedule. Is it easy? Not really, but I think it's a testament to how much I love speaking to these artists. I really love this, parking tickets aside. If you'd like to show your support for Sound and Vision, post a photo today, spread the word, leave a rating and review where you get your podcasts. And the reason I ask listeners to do this, it's simply so people who want to hear from these artists know it's out there. Again, thank you all, and here's to 200 more. Sound and Vision is supported by the New York Studio School, where drawing, painting, and sculpture are studied in depth, debated energetically, and created with passion. The school's full-time programs, a 2-year MFA degree and a 3-year certificate program, focus on experimental learning and sustained studio courses. Both programs invite students to focus on painting or sculpture, with drawing as an integral foundation for all creative production. Each semester begins with a 2-week drawing or sculpture marathon to generate momentum and expand one's range of strategies for future studio work. Since its inception, the New York Studio School has emphasized rigorous learning through direct experience. Learn about scholarship opportunities, schedule a tour, and ask questions by emailing info@nyss.com. The school welcomes applications for fall 2020 full-time study through nyss.org. Sound and Vision is also sponsored by Golden Artist Colors. Golden is a company based in upstate New York and is committed to making the best artist materials for artists to make work with. You can get it in just about every art store and online at goldenpaints.com. Rosemarie Fiore is a visual artist from the Bronx, New York. She combines painting and performance to produce artwork out of the actions of mechanisms. Her work investigates the space that exists between chaos and control. Her smoke painting tools harness and mix color smoke released from fireworks. These tools paint on paper using the painting technique fumage. She creates large abstract works on paper for exhibitions, commissions, and performances around the world. Her work has been exhibited by MoCA Jacksonville, Weatherspoon Museum, Queens Museum, the Bronx Museum, and Socrates Sculpture Park. Rosemarie is a fellow of MacDowell, Yaddo, Art Omni, Skowhegan, and Sculpture Space residencies. She's been awarded grants through the Milton Avery Foundation, NYSCA, NIFA, and the Wellentus Sharp Foundation. She's been reviewed by the LA Times, the New York Times, New York Magazine, Art in America, Art Forum, The Village Voice, and New York Arts Magazine. Her work is included in the public collections of Texas A&M University, UBS, Fidelity, Witherspoon Museum in North Carolina, and Cosmopolitan Hotel in Las Vegas. She's on the MacDowell Colonies Board, teaches at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and is represented by Von Lintel Gallery in Los Angeles. She'll be performing at Penn State University on April 23rd, sponsored by the Campus Arts and Hub Gallery. Here's me and Rosemarie in conversation. I cannot get over your glasses.
Well, thank you.
I love them. Those might be the favorite glasses I've ever seen.
Oh, thank you.
I don't want to ask where you got them, but
I got them at is it Brewster's Closet in Williamsburg? Beacons. I always mix up Brewster
Beacons Closet.
for whatever. Yeah,
well, they have a bunch of them now, but yeah, like the vintage place.
the one in they do in Williamsburg, and then they're just Stella McCartney,
Nice,
and I took everything out and put everything in,
Yeah.
and now they're they do everything for me.
nice. But yeah, it's been a while.
It has 1999.
Yeah, that's a long time, and that's when you started that stuff.
Yeah.
Well,
I was using my car,
Yeah.
which was a Subaru Legacy, as a drawing painting tool. Right, I used the car fluids that I kind of made a connection to the power source was the engine of the car. I turned on the car and I was able to connect this mechanism that shot fluid out of the back windshield wiper from the car. So like dirty motor oil, transmission fluid, and whatnot.
It seemed pretty messy.
It was messy.
Not messy, but just like a lot going on.
It was a lot going on. Well, Skowhegan had, do I want to say, was it 40 people or 35 people or 65 people? Do you remember?
My memory, which, as we mentioned, is terrible.
Yeah.
I feel like it must have been around 40 people.
Okay. So
right?
It
seems like about the size. Remember those
so.
Group photos they take?
Oh.
Seemed like about 40 people.
Yeah. God, that was amazing. And so there was so crowded.
Yeah.
No personal space. So I started to spend a lot of time in my car trying to figure out, well, number one, what to do after graduate school, because I just finished my MFA program at the Art Institute of Chicago.
Yeah.
Out on my own as an artist, trying to figure out how to create my own studio practice. What was my process? Highly interested in using, taking away my hand from art making. That's it. That's where I was at that point, just removing my hand from art making. So I was sitting in my car, and I just thought of using the car as an art making tool. Nothing new, right? We had Rauschenberg, who did a collaboration with John Cage, who created a long scroll of a tire print, of an inked tire print on paper.
Yeah.
So that was kind of the starting point of how can I push that further. And so I continued to use a lot of found technology to make art with. Everything from lawnmowers, which is a project that I created and exhibited at VCU in Richmond. Amusement park ride. I took a scrambler and turned it into a fixed point drawing painting tool.
Uh-huh.
That was a collaboration with Grand Arts in Kansas City. I used floor polishers to create paintings, waffle irons to create paintings. Just this
is all post school.
All post Skowhegan.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, what about before? Like what?
So
you grew up in New York, right?
I grew up right outside of New York City in Westchester.
Okay.
Yes, but my parents were both from the Bronx, and so that's where my studio is now in the old neighborhood.
But I could imagine you coming, I don't know what it is, but my memory of you being out on that lawn in the space with like the car, and I could picture you coming from like the countryside or something.
No, I mean suburbia. I came straight from Chicago, actually.
Yeah.
But that was the only space that I had as a private space.
Right.
There was so many, and that's why I picked the Romare Bearden studio, which I don't think any longer exists at Skowhegan.
It was the
pigeon. It was the pigeon coop, and there was like holes in the floor.
Right,
but it was the only studio that was a solo space studio with nothing around it. And so I chose that. And then and it was funny because Tom Finkelpearl, I remember he was like, hey, nobody chose this studio except you. I was like, yeah, I believe it.
Yeah.
But it was a great space. It had a good feel for me, and I was able to do what I wanted in that cool space. And so anyway, I started to drive my car up to park it. I just started spending a lot of time in the car and looking over the manual. Before that, in graduate school, I was creating cast sculptures that I had motors in and computer chips, and they moved and they did things, but I wasn't using the movement to create artwork.
Where does it all come from? So you grew up in Westchester. Mm-hmm. Your parents are from the Bronx. Were they creative people?
My dad and my grandmother were both artists, so they both taught in the public schools in the Bronx.
So it's a direct bloodline thing.
Yeah, I think so. I don't know. But yeah, I'm not coming from a family. Like my husband's family, they were all artists.
Oh, really?
The whole entire family.
Well, that's weird. That usually doesn't happen.
usually the sister,
don't get the
everybody.
Artist group.
No. Mm-mm. So he grew up like within the context of, and his mother is an imagist, Chicago imagist.
Yeah.
So she would hang out with she went to school with all the imagists. So he would go to their studios and run around as a 2-year-old. So he was deep within the context of the artist world, right?
And that's deep, like imagists. I imagine those get-togethers were a little wacky.
Very surreal, right? There's a lot of surrealism involved with it. But yeah, I mean, listen, for Christmas, we gave his mother a full-sized mermaid skeleton, which she's now painting from and incorporating it into her paintings. So it's a wonderful thing. We have a lot of fun.
Yeah, so it's a creative environment.
Very creative. I mean, we spend holidays doing figure drawing. Like, it's Thanksgiving. If we're there, it's like, hey, let's rent a model. Let's all draw together. So my niece would draw. I would draw. My husband would draw. She would draw. And it's totally awesome.
Yeah.
But I didn't grow up like that. I grew up with... My mother was a principal.
Okay.
In the Bronx, in an elementary school.
So what you're saying, a very easygoing school with no tension or struggle or nothing as a principal. Which is already a loaded position. You know what I mean? I'm sure.
Totally. But it was her neighborhood that she grew up with, and so it was something.
It's her community.
It's her community.
Still, I'm sure it was.
It was a way for her.
Being a principal seems like a tough gig.
It was tough. I remember visiting, but she was. She would walk down the hall. And everybody would get in line. They would hear her.
Run away.
They would get in line. And she somehow managed to have the whole school have a silent lunch, which is quite a feat.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so when I was in high school, I made her signs that said "quiet" with the finger over the lips of a head, Mm-hmm. And she would show that, and everybody would be quiet. It's quite amazing, but that was her world.
Yeah. And your dad?
Was an art teacher in a high school in Co-op City. Nice. So that was that was another challenging community,
But teaching and art, I mean, all the bases are covered. You've got a roadmap.
Right. You have a roadmap. So we would, go to the Met all the time, and, there was always art, opportunities to make art. But I had to make those decisions when I was older. That's where I wanted to direct, my life.
Right.
And make those decisions. And I remember looking at a college. I think I was looking at different colleges and stuff, in high school. And I went to some kind of portfolio thing at Pratt. Mm-hmm. And the guy told me, he's like, if you don't go to art school now, as an undergrad, you're never going to be an artist. And then I knew right then that this guy was full of, what.
Right.
And that it has nothing to do with that. It's about you and what you decide to do with every day, 24 hours a day.
Well, thank goodness you knew that at that point, because I'm sure there's a lot of people at that age I guess I have to go pay tuition at your school. So, you know what I mean? It's just sounds like a recruiting thing.
Yeah, you have to do a lot more than that to fool me
right
into something like that. And so, I was brought up to be self-empowered enough to know when I saw BS, and that was it. But so I ended up going to the University of Virginia, and focusing on studio art, but I had so many credits in art history that I just double majored in it. All I needed was one more class at the end of the day. I couldn't get enough of those art history classes.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Wait, is this UVA? Mm-hmm. Okay.
So it's not VCU.
Right. No,
right?
it's the Monticello.
Monticello,
it's the one.
Charlottesville.
I've been there to a graduation where there's that.
The lawn.
Yeah. The lawn.
That was surreal.
The whole bit. Isn't there an Edgar Allan Poe thing?
Yeah, he was there.
And there was like a room where supposedly it was where he did the Raven or something. I
thought that was done at Yaddo.
Maybe.
But that's crazy. Why would he be at Yaddo? Or why would he first of all, Yaddo didn't exist, but in Saratoga Springs. I don't know enough about Edgar Allan Poe's history. And maybe somebody said that there. Whatever. I somehow feel like that's a false lie. But he did get kicked out of UVA for drinking and gambling or something like that, I believe. I don't know if he has a degree. He had a degree from UVA.
Well, he was there.
Yeah, he was
His
there.
His spirit lives on.
Spirit is there. There's also isn't there a Poe house in the Bronx?
I don't know. I should know that, but I don't know.
And I should know it better. I'm throwing out a lot of things I'm not 100% sure about.
There's no fact checking on this podcast. Okay. There might be a couple of people who are like, yeah, of course it is, but it's all good. No worries.
Spotty memory here, but
so you liked UVA and the university experience?
I was in the studio all the time. I met a few mentors there, which is really always the best part of an education, right? Right. Those deep relationships. And so Lydia Gassman was a mid-career Picasso scholar, and her focus was on the weeping women and cosmology. Mm-hmm. And kind of the spirituality in some way of Picasso's practice. Yeah. Where, she would look at a napkin, picture of a napkin he had drawn on, and, kind of like map out the star system of lines and connect it to a constellation of a fighting bull. And, oh, my God, she was just amazing. And so I was her research assistant, but she was also a modernist painter. So I would build her canvases for her as an undergrad. And so her beautiful modern apartment, the white rug was spattered with paint. And it was a beautiful thing to see. Yeah. It was just incredible. She painted right on it. She was probably in her late 60s or early 70s when I knew her as an assistant. And she was a Romanian Jew. Mm-hmm. She her family escaped Europe. Yeah. Heavy accent. Mm-hmm. She would touch every student's face and say, Babika. She was just red lipstick, funky hair, leopard tights, high heels. Charismatic, fashion obsessed. Yeah. Brilliant. So we would go. I would sit down on her beautifully spattered rug, and we'd drink wine, smoke cigarettes, and talk about Apollinaire Foucault. Nice. It was my dream.
Yeah, those kind of people, though, they pave the way,
They pave the way.
They sort of light the fire.
They do. And all of her research was installed on every wall with lines and connecting notes and this and that, and they were art installations. And I had the unfortunate job of returning books, because what she would do is she would read them. She'd lie. Haven't you read this? And how could you say this? And you haven't done your research. And wrong, with Sharpie. Yeah. So I would always get, as soon as they heard that these books were coming from their house, from her apartment, the library would look through every page. Oh, yeah. And there would be marks and Sharpie and everything.
Damage the whole way through.
Oh, my. But it was, she was very inspirational for me. And her lifestyle was so out of the box for what I had experienced, not having grown up in an artist's house, that it was really inspirational for me to see that this type of lifestyle is achievable. Right. That you can live within an installation of your own mind's art, your own art. And that since she was so surrounded by it, she was so deep into her subjects. And it wasn't just painting, it was all of her research,
Yeah.
So, that made UVA an incredible experience for me. And then some of the professors in the department I had a very close kind of relationship with, and they were mentoring as well. I did spend a year abroad in Italy and in London, and that just opened up my mind. I was able to see Rachel Whiteread's house installed in the park there, and I mean, before it got demolished, and that piece just blew my mind.
Yeah.
It was so unsettling to see the inside of the house as the outside. It was really weird. I mean, I don't think I would have the same experience now but then at that time, at that age and where I was, and I was just I'm a sponge for learning about different art techniques, and the young British artists were just exploding into the world at that point. I think Damien Hirst, it was only a couple of years since these young British artists had, really started to make it leave their mark.
Yeah. It's funny how sometimes like that Rachel Whiteread and certain pieces can just blow your mind.
Yeah.
And I remember seeing the Bruce Nauman heads on the thing.
Yeah, where was that?
I think it was in New York. I want to say...
Is it MoMA?
MoMA, I think. Mm-hmm. I just remember encountering that piece and being like, what in the world is that? Like I was just like, what? And it's such a great way of being like, and then looking up that work and being like fascinated that you could be that diverse, and those early moments of like wonder, I think, paved the way. Yeah, I think in high school, the Jasper Johns museum show, was it at the Met? Gosh. There were quite a few. There was a Degas exhibit that had a huge impact on me, and but we were since my parents were both public school teachers, we did a lot of traveling in the summer. Yeah. So that was something that really, it was an opportunity to see so much art. That's a really nice advantage. I mean, and to have both, you really have to have both parents doing that. Yeah. That's kind of a bonus. Yeah, because they had like 3 or 4 months off in the summertime. And, our lives are really full. And because of that, we were able to do a lot of things, and always traveling and seeing things, whether it be local as far as art, or I think we made a trip to France, to Italy, and to England. Mm-hmm. It's pretty great. Yeah, it's a lot really of early travel. It took me so long to travel. Oh, really? Just growing up in a family, we didn't have any money, and we never traveled really, other than road trips. But like flying places, it wasn't until I went to college. No, and I remember there was airline called People's Air or something like that. Never heard of it. You had to. I remember I was so excited about the possibility of traveling that when the flights opened up, the day and the time, it was in the middle of the night, I ran into my parents' bedroom and I said, okay, you can start calling now. And you had to use a rotary phone to call this People's Air. And then they would finally, it was first come, first serve on these really cheap tickets. Yeah. And like there were screws missing in this plane with duct tape, It reminded me of like Aeroflot or something like that. I remember that's what that case was there. And I would sit and make sure they dialed, and I wouldn't let them give up. Yeah. They had to get the tickets because I really wanted to go. Right. That's great, though. I mean, and you sound like you were willing to take your life in your own hands. Jeez. But when you're young, you're not thinking of that. You just no, you're not. Let's travel. So, once you finished Virginia, I mean, was it foregone conclusion that you wanted to study for a couple more years? So I received a 5th year to stay on, and really the work I created in that 5th year got me into graduate school at the Art Institute. Yeah. So I created this installation work. What year was that? 97? Around. When I was in Virginia? No, when you started Chicago. Oh, yeah, 97. Yeah. We would have been in the same class. Were you at the Art Institute? No, I didn't go. Oh. I went to Yale instead of the Art Institute. Oh, that's right. You went to Yale. I knew that. But I had gotten a full scholarship to the Art Institute, and I turned it down. Oh, see, I took my full scholarship. You got one? Yeah, through the fiber department. See, we would have been together. We would have been in the same class. The trustee scholarship, I think they called it. They have a great... I mean, that giving kids full scholarships like that is so great. I don't know what it's like now, but... Yeah. I don't think it's
I think they still only give out one per department.
Yeah.
I don't know. I could be
year.
wrong.
But it's still a gift for that person because nowadays.
There's no way I would have gone. I couldn't have gone. I didn't have the money. I didn't want to take out the loan. And it was expensive back then to go to the Art Institute.
Right, yeah.
Just even if for 2 years, it's really, living expenses and even an assistantship. Teaching assistantship doesn't
cover everything.
Cover everything. It covers
Imagine
something, but
nowadays I guess it's a lot harder.
Jeez. Yeah, I don't know what to say.
Yeah.
I don't have anything to
Good
say.
luck.
Good luck. They'll figure it out like we figured it out.
Yeah.
Art is one of those things where you can't kill it. So it's just they're going to figure out how to do it, and they'll do it well.
Yeah. And those who are really driven and, you'll just find a way to make it happen.
You always do. I mean, because literally there's nothing else you can do.
Right.
And once you've found that you're really happy, it might be a hard life. Every life is hard. But once you find out that that's what you're designed to do, you're not going to give. It's very hard to make a choice to do something else,
right?
Unless you have no other choice. And so part of what I think a lot about is privilege that we had. Just the privilege of being able to afford a school, and being able to focus so much time in high school or post high school to get in. Or high school and university, undergrad, to prepare a portfolio. I wouldn't have gotten into the Art Institute if I hadn't taken that 5th year as an undergrad. It was like a grant. I didn't pay for anything. I could take classes, had a studio space, and they gave me a show. And that exhibition allowed me to create work that I could photograph at an exhibition, a large exhibition with installation work and sound work there and movement and stuff. And in fact, it's really funny. I wouldn't say funny. It's interesting because Tamron, who you just met, who works at the Hub and teaches as well, she at Penn State, she was working on my exhibition. I didn't meet her. She was behind the scenes.
Just
organizing it.
Organizing it?
I guess I had installed it once at the gallery at the art building and another at the student center, the same exhibition. And she was at the student building, and she organized it. And that's why she asked me to apply to this to put work up at Penn State.
Right.
So it's a very small world. It's amazing.
Yeah. Well,
how small it is.
I tell students that all the time. It's like make connections and talk to people, and sometimes opportunities, or you'll just meet someone, and then 15 years later, you'll meet them again, and your worlds collide in in a way related to whatever you're doing work-wise too. And it's just keep your radar open and be nice to people, and be social, talk to people, and that stuff is important, because it's communicating.
Yep, it's very true.
Yeah. And
in life, you should be that way anyway, because, everybody, we're all equal, right? We all have our wonderful experiences. We have our superpowers, so to speak. And everybody has their own thing, and it's worth spending the time to get to know everybody.
Definitely.
Burning bridges is something that I think is for idiots.
Yeah.
There's no reason to do it. Some people, you might not groove with them on a certain politically or whatever, but hey, there's other things that you can connect on.
Totally.
And you learn from each other. We're always learning from each other. As an artist, you have to always give yourself a little bit of slack. You got to love yourself and make mistakes, learn from mistakes, know that mistakes are even more important than successes. They always lead the process of figuring things out, even on some like the studio, and making decisions that aren't quite right for work, and then changing those decisions to fit the work better. All those things are really important, and they have to be embraced. If you don't embrace, I call it the light and the dark together, you're never going to be able to get to your vision, whatever that is. And sometimes we don't really even know what it is, but we still strive. For me, it's just a wonder. Like when I made that work with a scrambler, I was with a really good friend from UVA. This was years later. He's a writer. And we're on the scrambler, and I sat there, I said, this is like a spirograph. Is this right? Am I like tripping or something? Is this like a spirograph? And he's like, yeah. Totally. Which is called like a hypocycloid. I might be pronouncing it wrong. It's a circle that rotates within a circle.
Uh-huh.
And years later, I did the project at Grand Arts, but it was that moment of time where just something came to me, and I wrote down the idea, and then there was an opportunity to make it.
Right.
So that process of getting from A to B, from the idea to making it, seemed impossible, because how was I, one, going to get a Scrambler amusement park ride? Mm-hmm. And two, how was I going to get the paintings done? They're 60 by 60 feet. That's like 4 or 5 stories. I don't know what it is. It's somewhere in between there.
It's big.
Yeah. Like, how am I going to do this? So I remember writing in my, just thinking, like, this is when, like, cows can jump over the moon kind of thing. But, hey, it could be an interesting project if I could figure out how to make it work. And when you meet the right people that are willing to dive deep into these mysterious, projects which are not easy to figure out, then you can figure things out.
Right.
And it's about having faith, I guess, which is something that has always been a struggle, with me. But now it's a little easier, because I recognize, like, when I lose faith in something, it's part of the process, and it's good. Mm-hmm. Those dark times when you're, like, pulling out your hair and wondering, why am I doing this? And I should just not do this, and just, but I can't.
Yeah.
It's just
seeing it through, and the persistence and all that. Yeah. It's
you have to wonder. You have to want to find the answer out to these questions in order to persist.
Right.
And, and it's funny, when I met with Grand Arts, and they said, can you guarantee that the Scrambler thing is going to work? And I said, no, I can't. I wasn't savvy enough to make it animation. Because if I had, I could have just shown them the animation.
Right.
But I took out a Scrambler, and I said, you see, as not a Scrambler, a Spirograph. And I said, you see, this is what it's doing.
It's going to be this, just bigger.
And I actually made my my sketches using a Spirograph.
Yeah.
So with that project, I treated the ride as an art making tool, but as almost like an inkjet printer, where I did one color at a time. I started with the lightest color, and then I went to blacks. Or so I took the colors from the tool, the colors from the amusement park ride. So it was primary colors plus white and black. The vinyl seats were black.
Yeah.
So I was able to make that decision easily, because I just took the primary colors right from the ride, and we were able to match the colors and use them. So
that's cool.
Yeah.
Well, getting back to Chicago, was that a good experience? Did your work change a lot there?
Yeah, it did. It did. I just worked. You know what I remember most there were the other people in the program that my colleagues.
Right.
And what they were making.
There's a lot of students there,
yeah.
right?
And they threw the fiber students in with the painters. So we would have been thrown in together, because I'm assuming you would have been painting.
I would have.
Yeah, at that point. I'm not sure. But, and so, the long nights sitting in the studio with the painters, and, I've always been a painter anyway. It's just... it's always been so problematic for me to figure out how to create my tools, and how to remove my hand, and how to approach paint.
Right.
And so brushes don't work for me.
Yeah.
Like paintbrush,
Traditional
traditional. They just don't. But what was really helpful when I was an undergrad, I studied in Florence. I studied art conservation. Mm-hmm. Okay. So I studied with one of the students of the chief conservator for the Cimabue cross, which was destroyed during the Great Flood. And so we learned a lot of techniques, from how to reline paintings to tratteggio, which is just a way to apply streaks of color to an area of paint loss so that you can tell the restorer's hand as a separate artistic contribution to the work than from the original piece, right?
Yeah.
And so I learned, and then I interned at the at a conservation shop, and so I learned all the traditional techniques of Cennino Cennini,
That's so cool.
in the Renaissance. And Vasari, actually, Vasari also wrote about restoration techniques, not as deeply because Vasari was like the first art critic, right? So that was his main. I'm not so thrilled about his painting, but that's another story. But his contributions are very important, and so Chinino Cennini wrote a whole book on artist materials. It's like the Myers book. Do you remember that Myers book?
It's like a sort of
like
Bible of materials.
This is how you mix pigments with
Right.
this. This is how you cast a full figure out of a plaster cast.
Yeah.
It would show you how to. This is how you reline a painting. This is how you clean a painting. So I recall that for text, there was a whole bunch of textiles that had to be cleaned. And so he said to me in Italian, he's like, go down there and get some bread. Get that really soggy stuff, like the really spongy stuff. And he told me which bread. So I got the bread, and we ripped out the middle of this spongy bread, and we gently rolled it over the surface of this textile, and it picked up all the dirt and left all the tempera paint.
That's so funny.
Nothing new, because in Cennino Cennini, they used to use bread as erasers for charcoal.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
It's funny because there's always that myth that they clean the Sistine Chapel with Q-tips and water.
Oh, when they did that,
when they restored
big
it,
restoration.
I don't know if it's true or not, but that was the word
That's
on the street.
That's
But you would
what
think
they
it's
did.
like this, special. You always think it's going to be something.
Oh, right.
A little more. I don't know how to describe it. Not elevated, but bread.
High tech. You see, Italians are. They stick more to tradition with conservation.
Yeah.
They stick more to the traditional thing. The Americans are the ones that will use more like sort of industry-based methods to clean or to restore. I mean, think
chemicals
about so the restoration techniques, because American conservators have to deal with the Abex art, a lot of experimental early acrylic paintings, and God knows what Magna stuff. That
non-traditional stuff that hasn't been tested over time.
Yeah, and so usually with the Italian conservators, they're dealing with a known quantity,
right? Yeah,
which is usually egg tempera. Like, the biggest problem with the Sistine Chapel was the al secco part. You remember our instruction at Skowhegan on fresco, the al secco part of it, of course, used the egg.
Yeah.
And so the bacteria over time was really destroying the surface. I got to say, though, I was fortunate enough to see the Sistine Chapel with no restoration, and then to see half and half. And
that's like night and day, right?
And then to see the whole thing. And my interest in materials and technique, it started really there with restoration. Or even before, because remember that since I was an assistant to Lydia Gassman at the University of Virginia with Picasso scholar, right? There was so much interest, of course, with surrealism with her, right?
Yeah.
So there was so many techniques that, Max Ernst has so many techniques that were very interesting to me to study. Via her lens on the world, as a mentor for me. And that really sparked my interest in materials. And that has carried throughout my career, is this interest in pushing the boundaries of materials and how to apply them, and mark making and ways to achieve different kinds of marks.
I love how different that is, though, in a way. Because art conservation is seen as such a formal, tight kind of, the materiality of it is.
I could never do it.
It's so specific, right? It is, yeah. But then the stuff that you're doing is so outside the box and creative and kind of almost like punk, or like, just like a little more experimental and
sure.
And I see it kind of in the line of like thinking of Cage or people like that who are doing things that are, just pushing outside of the norms of, expression and the way things are wrote as far as like making.
Right. Well, the chaos thing is very important with the controlling chaos, finding that, and same with me, with John Cage. I think I could never do art restoration. Yeah. I mean, there was another intern when I was there in Florence that summer who spent 6 months picking off paint from a putti sculpture
Oh my gosh.
to the gold with like a little pin and a microscope. It was not my thing.
That takes a certain
But there was
patience.
many, like when you reline a canvas, the restorer creates these small bags which are sewn together from linen, you know, and they're filled with BBs. And you weigh down the canvas so that when you transfer the canvas from one backing to another, it all is pressed evenly.
Oh, that's interesting.
So I took that concept.
Yeah.
So when I created, when I started working with fireworks on paper, and I started using collage to rethink the form of the image using all material that was generated through the process of fumage using fireworks, I created sandbags, which were not small. You know, they're substantial 10-pound, 5 to 10 pounds or whatever they're. And in my studio, you can see a whole wall of them because I cover all of my paper pieces after I glue them with these very heavy bags. And I got that idea
to flatten them?
To like flatten them as
Evenly.
flat as pancake, like as flat as you could possibly get them. And the adhesion is phenomenal because the glue just dries underneath a weight.
Yeah.
And everything is flat. And so the paper doesn't warp. And all that was from my time working in restoration and remembering these bags of BBs that they had made to reline a canvas. So I think that there's a lot of elements here and there that one, keeps with them as they go forward in life. And for me, that was one of those instances.
That's pretty cool.
Everybody has them, and as an artist, since I can't just open a book and follow something to do what I do. I have to constantly create ways of dealing with problems, not only applying, pigment, but how to see the process through from start to finish so that I can get the work that I want to get out of the whole process. And so I'm always creating these different ways of doing it. I think all artists do that. I love visiting artist studios and seeing the way that they're organized and how they sort of, make life easy for them when they paint or whatever they do. And as a painter, I think all painters are very extra about that.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, totally.
In their own way.
Right.
Like you're probably extra in a way that I'm not extra and so on and so forth. And using your techniques would do nothing for me, and same the other way around. So you have to kind of figure out how to make your process as streamlined as possible, because you want to spend a lot less time dealing with technical issues and more time dealing with the creative process, because that's the fun part.
You kind of like whittle away what works for you and what you're trying to get at. So you just, over the years of working with materials, there's like little hacks here and there, or you find this, oh, that works better than that. And then over time, you kind of streamline it. Unless you're one of those people who just are constantly trying to reinvent what they're doing physically. Right. Which some people do that. Exactly. They never want to know what they're working with. Right. It should always be, a variable. And that's right. It just depends on what you're trying to do.
That's right.
Were you, sort of bringing in a tangent, are you interested in music, A, and B, music that is experimental? Or there's such a parallel between, I think, certain kinds of music and what you're doing with work, but I don't know if that's in your wheelhouse at all.
I have a confession. I'm like a Pandora John Cage station fan.
Oh, really? So it's straight to Cage?
Well, it's not always him. It's
Tony Conrad?
It's whatever they fit into that category.
That algorithm, yeah.
But I love that kind of music when I'm creating work. But sometimes, since when I perform, it's really like a dance with the tool when I use my pyrotechnic tools, and there's a movement there. It's a dance with the tool. It's a collaboration. It's a partnership, and so one thing I want to do in the future going forward, and I just haven't had the right collaboration to do this, is to make the tools become music, sort of sound generating tools, because you have wind, you have the vibration of the tool as it rolls on the floor or on the ground, which tuning forks, whistles, anything. A lot of things can create, sound with the tool. And so that's kind of something I'd like to do.
Can't you just mic it up?
I can. I just, I'd like to collaborate with a musician or a composer on that, actually, because I think that there's a lot more that would be, as I would open up that oyster, crack that nut of kind of combining yet another thing, another genre into what I do. Now, not only movement and performance and painting and sculpture, but also sound becomes something that I can, control in some way,
Definitely.
right? Or it can create the context or the situation in which sound would be generated. I would love to crack that nut open with a composer.
Remember
or something like
the Officially in Vice, The Way Things Go video?
Oh, I love that video.
I love the sound in that.
Oh, that's the best video.
Isn't it?
It's
like
the best.
ASMR before
Yeah.
knew what that was. But it was...
And did you see the show at the Guggenheim?
Yeah.
That was pretty incredible, too. Yeah.
Really incredible.
It was really incredible to see everything in context.
Yeah.
The new work. That video is groundbreaking. I mean, you can show that to students now. It's so contemporary.
Yeah, it's timeless.
Yeah.
I mean, that band OK Go did like a version of that with
one
of their videos, speaking of Chicago. And, everyone loves that stuff. Everyone loves Rube Goldberg's sort of contraptions that, but yeah, that was a really kind of a groundbreaking video, I think, as far as art.
God, I would love to have, to see... We'll teach a class, and the only thing that you do in that class is just the end of the semester is create something like that. So you spend the whole semester experimenting for each little part, and then the whole thing comes together at the end, and that's the whole point of the class. It's not painting, it's not drawing, it's really engineering, isn't it?
Yeah, and time-based engineering.
Time-based engineering. And then, such a high level of failure in that, right, throughout the process.
And think about it, too. If you split them into groups, it would be kind of like an exquisite corpse where you, at the ending, you figure out the beginning and ending first. And you say, look, the group A's ending is going to be a domino at this spot.
Right.
And that's all you got.
Yeah.
So you have to not only work within your own constraints, but then you have to make this whole thing flow together.
Yeah. Yeah. That would be an exquisite course.
Maybe we should do a joint syllabus.
Wouldn't that be fun?
It would be really fun. I mean, you would get... That's the thing. It's when we were talking about Legos before, there's something universally fun and kind of... I don't know, it's that childlike exuberance for creativity that I think comes out and things like that. That when you reconnect people with that feeling and bring it into like a classroom setting or, something you can do as artwork, it's kind of like, really, I think would inspire a lot of people to take it to the next level. Yeah, or even have like a mega group of artists. Yeah. Spend time, decide to spend time, once a month on this project. Will take 2 years, and you all get together and you figure out these parts. Yeah. Wouldn't that be wonderful? Yeah. I mean, the creativity level is just so amazing, and thinking outside the box, it just trains you to accept failure as part of the process, even more so than anything else. I think with painting, when you have an object at the end, I think it's harder for artists to accept that failure while going through the process. And with something like this, where you're creating a sort of a group experiment, you don't have that same looming, like the canvas has to be finished, or the piece has to be finished, it has to be this size, and it's easier to sort of just let loose. And a lot of it is learning how to accept failure. There's nothing ever that is done that is a failure. Right. When I use the pyrotechnics, so much of it is chaotic, and but I've just kind of, because the process is so explosive in so many ways, it just takes, it's taken out the control element. It's allowed me to really find a balance between the control and the chaos. And each artist, I think, finds their own medium with which they can do that with. Yeah. Hopefully. And for me, it's that medium, fumage via the fireworks. So, right. I have friends who use pencils. That's pencil and paper. Right. For me, I could never do that, but for them, they're able to create works that don't feel too
too tight or too controlled. I mean, good work is that balance, right, between the embracing the unknown and the chaos, and then the balance between what you bring to it, which is kind of controlling it down. For me, that's interesting work. So anyway.
Well, so why don't we talk a little bit about what you're up to now? Because you're working here.
Yep.
We're in Pennsylvania.
Yep.
But yeah, I'm sure you got other stuff going on too. So
yeah,
can you share all that with
sure.
the listeners?
So here I'm working on an exhibition, performance, and workshops. But I'm also working on a TED Talk, which will happen at the end of March. So that's what I'm doing. And
Where
when
are you
I get home,
giving that? Do you know?
At Texas A&M University.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm working on that, and I'll be going to Kohler residency in May. Working on with the Foundry there, collaborating with the Foundry, working on pyrotechnic tools that I'll be using in performances. So
nice.
I'll do that for the whole summer. I'll come back in late August. So it'll be a lot of fun. So I'm really looking forward to that.
You've never been adverse to being on the road, it seems, or doing residencies and getting out there.
Yeah.
Do you feed off that energy, or does it take the life out of you?
Well, I think I don't do it every year, right, these residencies. And one year I did 3 residencies. What was it? Blue Mountain Center, Saltonstall, and Yaddo. That was too much.
That's a lot.
That was too much. I learned that early on. I think, I'll be away for 16 weeks at Kohler. I think that's, the maximum. It's going to be a lot every day in the Foundry.
4 months.
Yeah. Well, it's from May 11th through August 22nd.
It's a long spell.
It's a long spell.
But you can get a lot of work done.
Yeah. I mean, I'll be flying back for stuff.
Yeah.
I'm on the board at McDowell Colony, so I'll be in for their medal day in August, and but still, it's going to be a lot of away. But I don't have kids. I have a husband, but we don't have children, so it's easier to get away. It's always been easier for me to get away.
The anchor isn't fully dropped. No. I know. It's like once you have a kid, I feel like your residency thing is. Well, I know maybe some people do it. Some residencies allow for it, but I think it's so hard when they get into their rhythm that you just say to yourself, "All right, I got 18 years here."
Yeah, I mean,
to hold tight, and then after that, residency tour for the rest.
Yeah, I mean, Skowhegan was 9 weeks.
Right.
Wasn't I don't think it's 9 weeks anymore. I think it's 7
or really?
I think it's less. I think our experience was much longer, and I feel like at the end of that 9 weeks, people were ready to transition to the next thing. It was
definitely.
really a lot, just
some
a lot to take in.
Some people were ready after the duck itch hit.
Yeah, that was just poor Nao. I remember her just covered from head to toe.
Everyone made fun of me because I wouldn't go in the lake. I don't know.
You were smart.
I didn't want to do it, and people kept making fun, or just being like, "Come on, man, just jump in the lake." I was like, "Nah, it's not for me." And sure enough.
You knew it. Intuitively, there was something there.
Something told me to not go in that lake.
I did a residency at Roswell, New Mexico, for a year.
Yeah.
That was incredible.
That sounds amazing.
It was amazing. It was, let me see, I was scheduled to go in October 2001. So
Jesus.
Yeah. Push that back a couple of months because it was a little too difficult to organize all this. And but being away from my practice here and from everything that was going on in New York, it really just freed me up to just start really diving into the work that I'm doing now with the pyrotechnics. And that was great. That was fabulous. But I remember trying to rent out my Red Hook space, rent out my Red Hook studio, put everything in storage for a year.
It's
and
a lot.
Going through that again would be impossible. I mean, New York is one of those places where it doesn't let you go. It's so hard to tie up all those loose ends.
Yeah, it's almost like you're just stuck.
I
mean, I used to feel that way, and then when you have a kid, and the school system there is so regimented, or it's such a thing that it is really difficult to just think about spending time away. A significant amount of time, and then you get that feeling when you get back of catching up. seems intimidating.
I think I had that. I was doing the AIM program through the Bronx Museum before I left, and Jackie, who was teaching it there, I said to her, "How am I going? I'm going to miss so much here." And she's like, "Just go." She's like, "You're going to come back with so much work," and she was right. I came back with so much work and so many ideas, and I was just off and running because of this, the undisturbed time for an entire year.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just you can't even think about it. It's like unfathomable. It's not like Yaddo or McDowell's like 2 months max.
Right.
It's a year.
Yeah, that's a lot of time.
With your everything taken care of. You know,
Which is great. Yeah.
You know,
it's almost like utopia.
But I did teach a class at the local university so that I could learn dressage.
Oh, nice.
So I learned how to ride a horse.
Yeah.
And it was amazing. It was really
cool.
fun. But that was my dressage money, was teaching. And not that I have done it since, but it was really fun to be able to have that experience out there. But I had to give up my lease in Red Hook and everything. And I ended up getting a Sharp studio, which at that time, which I think is called a Sharp Willentis studio now. Or Willentis Sharp, which was in Tribeca. And so I moved directly into my studio. Don't tell anybody, but I just lived out, out of my studio down there. And I was able to just continue that experience from Roswell of making work because I didn't have any rent to pay whatsoever.
Yeah.
And, I had the gym to, go and work out and take a shower. And I just worked on my work, and it was pretty incredible.
It's great.
But so I was able to extend that experience another year. So that was great.
And you like the Bronx?
I love it. Well, my family's from the Bronx. So I live in Morris Park, which is the old Italian area. And that area is really interesting historically because it used to be a race course. Mm-hmm. So that whole area is a big racetrack.
Like what kind of race?
Horse racing at first.
Oh, right.
Then it got sold to, I think it got sold either first to the car industry and then to air and space. Right. Or it's the other way around. But either way, they had like experimental flying machines that they would... I think Langley had a plane that he flew out of there, and Chevrolet, I believe, had a car, and then the racetrack. Then there was a huge fire, and the whole place burned down. The city bought it and started to cut up all the area into plots.
Yeah.
So anyway, you can still find horseshoes. And where we live is located on the finish line.
Crazy. How do you know? Like, the old photos or something? Or?
Well, I'm a fourth generation to live in the house.
Yeah. Oh,
so,
okay.
Okay. But so my next door neighbor was best friends with my grandmother.
Okay.
So, but yes, there's photos. There's catalogs and books and stuff on it, and you can do the research and. So we figured out that we were right on the finish line.
Yeah, that's great. And and you're a Yankees fan, right?
My mother was. I'm not. I'm really not into baseball.
It didn't take. No, but I feel like people from the Bronx too, even if they're not huge fans, they're a Yankee fan.
It could be a Yankee fan. Yeah,
sure.
My husband is a Cubs fan, and that's like if you're a Cubs fan, you're
Cubs
like
fan for life.
You're a Cubs fan for life. But my mother was a very big fan, and she got everybody's autograph and then lost them all because they would have been hundreds of thousands of dollars, like the amount of. She was like a groupie,
a collector of all that stuff.
She was a group. She would go to all of it, and she would go to the dugout. She would get everybody's signature. And
wait, your mother or grandmother?
My mother.
Your mother.
Yeah.
And none of that trickled down. You didn't go see games and stuff.
We did. We went to see games. Yeah, but. No, it didn't. I mean, she would wait online and get balls signed when she was, 70 years old.
Yeah.
It was who she was.
Right.
My father grew up in the same neighborhood, but didn't care at all.
Really?
So I think it depends on who you...
It took the mom? She was the baseball fan?
She's the one, yeah. She was the one.
It's pretty great.
Yeah.
I mean, it's such a, I go to the Bronx to see the Yankees.
Oh, so you're a fan.
Well, yeah. I mean,
all right.
I grew up in Pittsburgh, and I'm not going to be a Pirates fan. I mean, I'm not a masochist. It's brutal. Steelers and other teams, yeah, but not the Pirates. So when I moved to New York and being in a Japanese family, that was when Matsui started playing for the Yankees, which was a huge, he's like the biggest player in Japan, so it was a big deal.
Right.
So just started watching the games, and it's kind of a nice pace while you're working in the studio to have a baseball game on. Because you don't always have to be watching it,
It's nice to hear the audio, I have to admit, because it brings back wonderful memories of the cheering. My mother would, cheer, and I would hear that. And she's gone now, so it has a bit of a connection to my emotional connection to me.
Right.
And that was always in the background in our house, But my brother is much more of a baseball fan than I am, and my nieces are huge baseball fans.
That's cool.
Yankees, and so
it's fun.
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing here is it's really exciting, and it's great that you're doing this workshop for the students, and it sounds like you're having fun. It seems like fun.
It is.
Maybe it's just the illusion of the physicality of it and pyrotechnics, but it just seems like fun.
I always look at everything as a huge experiment.
Yeah.
You put all the right things that need to be in place, right? You don't want it to be a failure. But so there's a chaos. Chaos is always in the equation with my work. But I think and I think it's important to open up your work. I'm not just interested in creating imagery, although that's something I do all the time when I'm at home in my studios. I work as a painter, pull my hair out, try to create imagery. And but what comes out of these projects that I work on is so valuable to me. And because I make so many tools, it's very valuable to keep that kind of flowing and to be able to share it with other people. And it's interesting because usually nobody comes up with anything that I haven't already kind of thought about, right? But I find it's fascinating to see what people come up with, and the way they approach it. Yeah. And I have no problem just letting it all happen and accepting it, just making sure nobody's hurting themselves.
Right.
That's important. But if I wouldn't, often I wouldn't solve some kind of technical tool problem the way they do. Yeah. And sometimes I know, that's overkill, or I try to think of when I create my tools, they have to be very functional. So all my decisions that I make are functional decisions. All my tools are laminated with 100 layers of glitter and polyurethane so that when I'm in a performance and there's smoke in the air, the sun shines on the tool and I can see it. Yeah. And I can there's a magnetism between me and my tool that isn't broken.
Right. That's
really important to me. So everything, functional, it can't be big, so big that I can't twirl it without it hitting my feet. The wheels should be smoothly working, because if they stick, it screws up my experience. It's all about my experience.
Right.
The marks, whatever marks it makes, I know I can incorporate into a painting somewhere in some time, So there are many tools I don't use often, and there's some that are my favorite because the user experience element of it is just amazing.
Yeah.
And I like how they look visually. So the way I sort of make decisions with sculpture has to do with function.
Right.
And if there's something in there that's not functioning and isn't really adding anything, I won't add it. But often when you do these workshops, there's a lot of things that are added to these tools that have no purpose, that are just cumbersome, that are in the way, that make the experience not so great. So I keep on sort of trying to hit home that these are going to be used. People don't think about using their sculptures for anything other than kind of putting them somewhere, right?
Yeah. Look at this. Yeah.
Because anything we use, we buy, usually.
Right.
Right.
Well, that's the idea. I mean, when people are making things, it's usually to either use it themselves or other people for use.
Right. So I even build my own chairs and stuff that are the right height. I mean, it's almost completely extra. But the last thing I want to think about when I'm making artwork and thinking about an image or thinking about, an imagery or whatever, color, is to think, oh, God, I'm not sitting on a chair that I feel stable in, or this tool is not rolling at all.
Yeah.
So
like fighting your material.
Fighting the material. Yeah. And so that's a concept I think that has to be learned, and we take it for granted. And also, we are so much like the one size fits all kind of way of thinking in this country. If you go to Home Depot and you're a woman, you're going to find that there's one work glove that will fit you. Right. One. Yeah. Thank God I have a kind of big hand that can go into a medium. Mm-hmm. But my assistants, it's like I have to always get them that one. If they have smaller hands, there's one choice. Now, why is that? Yeah. Because we know the answers for that. But I'm saying that like form fitting everything to you and your body, it makes the experience. Remember 9 Inch Nails?
Yeah, of course.
That I grew up with them in high school, right? So that idea wasn't foreign to me of an artist form fitting the tools to their body so that their body movement and the way that they move, everything. The drum is located exactly where his hand will hit it, not where your hand would hit it, or my arm would reach.
Custom.
Yeah, customizing everything.
Do you have a custom car?
No, I won't do that. It's not important to me. It's not an art making tool. It feels too much. I'd customize my tools. I customize. I did. I put in darkening.
Well, it's
lens.
A tool too. It makes sense.
It is.
You're looking. I mean, what more important tool than looking through this stuff every minute of the day?
That's right. That's right. And artists are, especially painters, are interested in that often. Yeah. But yeah, so I customize a lawnmower by making it into a hot rod. I put, flames on it, and I use that to paint with and to cut up paint and create paintings with. So anyway, customizing tools makes sense to me, but customizing cars, I love it. I love looking at it. I have books and books and books and books of customized cars, but driving around in it seems too much. It doesn't fit who I am.
Right. Yeah, I don't have one either, but when I see those shows where they take a car and completely gut it and redo it, like for that person and what they like, I'm always amazed by that.
Yeah, there was that MTV one, Pimp Your Ride.
With Exhibit.
Amazing.
Love that show.
But there was always a lot of things that were extra, like too much in there.
I think that was the
5 video screens. It's like you're going to get into it. Like you don't need 5. But I remember this ice cream truck. Did you see that one where a robotic hand came out? It didn't look like a hand. It was a robotic arm came out with your ice cream cone.
Oh, I didn't see that, but that seems like a lot.
It's a lot.
They probably run out of ideas. I mean, they got to fill a half-hour show. It's like, how much stuff are we going to fit in this vehicle? But in that sense, that's kind of, they're pushing the creative side of things. I love the ones where they put so many fucking speakers in the trunk that you're just going to destroy the pavement.
I
just love
exactly.
it. They're like, you like music? All right, we're going to give you like 10 million watts. Decibels of sound.
It's unbelievable. I mean, I remember going to Graceland. Have you ever been there?
I haven't.
It's worth the trip. If you like customized living spaces, that place is customized.
I can't imagine. I mean, I've heard stories about it.
Yeah, carpeted ceilings. Carpeted lampshades.
Whoa.
I know. It's unbelievable. And he used to sit, when he watched TV, he would watch many at once, all on in like in a formation in front of him. So they'd be stacked. I want to say in a cube or something, but they were stacked, and he'd watch all the stations at once. It's totally customized way of sort of absorbing the world, right?
It sounds like a Namjoon-packed installation ahead of his time.
Yeah,
eating a banana. What did he like? Peanut
butter banana sandwich.
Well, never ended a podcast on an Elvis reference.
There's always a first.
John Cage. There, we ended it a little more intellectually. Well, thanks so much for taking the time out to talk.
Oh, thank you.
I look forward to seeing this stuff in the future, and the sound thing I want to see too. So.
I do too. That's got to be on the docket soon.
Make it happen somehow. That'll be great.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for talking.
Thank you.
Sound and Vision is recorded, edited, and produced by myself, Brian Alfred. You can find more images from the podcast on Instagram at Sound and Vision Podcast. You can find out more about my work at brianalfred.net or on Instagram at Alfred Studio. Many thanks to Rosemarie Fiore. It was great meeting up with her in Pennsylvania and doing the podcast. Make sure you check out her work and follow her on Instagram at Rosemarie Fiore NYC. Many thanks to Michael Lovett for the intro, Evan Marion for the intro-outro music, and Emily Burns for her design assistance. You can become a Patreon patron of the podcast by visiting patreon.com/soundofvisionpodcast. You can get your name dropped in one of these episodes and get a hand-drawn thank you. And listeners like you help support the podcast. So please go to iTunes, rate and review, or Google Play, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Please put in the good word and spread the word to others. Thanks so much.